Now then, 2nd of May 2021, had my second jab Friday. Slept all day, slept it off all day yesterday. Managed 2 afternoons in a pub with my mates, so things are looking up. But we're here to discuss my latest favourite Rush album, and I've called this episode The Mass Production Zone because that album is Signals. Now, Signals, released on September the 9th, 1982, was Rush's 9th studio album, produced by Terry Brown, long-term associate, but it was to be his last production with the band. 43 minutes, 12 seconds long, and it was originally released on vinyl. In my opinion, Signals was the most eagerly awaited Rush album, simply because it was a follow-up to the magnificent Moving Pictures. I think all Rush fans expected more of the same. However, what we got was an album with a prominent role for keyboards and a lot less emphasis on standard Rush orientated guitar riffs. Lyrically, Neil constructed a slight framework with some of the tracks linked the progress of youth from the city suburbs to adult life, with other tracks relating to space, growing old, and the role of the new world. And a new idea constructed was the Triangle of Fear. Indeed, Gady sang at the end of Moving Pictures on the track Vital Sounds that everybody's got to deviate from the norm. So the band did give their audience a little clue as to the future direction of the band. Track 1 is yet another opening masterpiece from the band. I first remember hearing Subdivisions on stage live at Deeside Leisure Centre on the 31st of October 1981. They included it in their set before it was recorded from the album. And I remember thinking that was different, but at the same time, obviously not realising the significance of the piece. I would argue it has become the most influential lyric, which has evoked images and memories and emotions to more people than any other Rush song. To achieve this with a song that is a complete different style from any of their previous music is quite some accomplishment. It's a piece whereby, for the first time in their history, Alex adopts the rhythm parts and the main theme is totally keyboard oriented during its alternative time changes. The track does finish with a classic solo from Alex, reverting back to some musical normality for Rush. However, for the most part, musically, it's a completely different style. Lyrically, it's a very significant and massive piece to a lot of music people. For me, the piece revolves around Neil's concept of the mass production zone, an environment creating a world full of conformity and order, suffocating individual thought and ideas. This pressure to conform is applied in two distinct ways. First, the very structure of suburban life, which is rigidly and structurally planned out. And secondly, the peer pressure that is so hard for the nonconformist to resist. High school halls and shopping malls are both places of typical teenage life, and also but two places what instill conformity and peer pressure. Be cool or be cast out reinforces them conformist ideas. So the argument concludes that the suburbs are a place one needs to escape from, particularly if you're young, so you can develop as an individual. The suburbs have no charms to soothe the restless dreams of youth, with its pre-notions of conformity and the values of urban production zones suffocating ambitious youth. For me, the song says, live for yourself, think for yourself, do not fall into the trap of mass ideas. Basically, we are back to Neil feelings about groupthink and how it strangles individuality and independent thinking. A wonderful piece of music, surprising but a stunning opener. Massive insight to what the band stands for, an incredible legacy from Rush. Before I leave this track, there are some great cover versions. A particular favourite of mine is one by Allegiant. Check it out on YouTube. Alright, so the youth has left the suburbs. Which direction does he go in? Well, that answer is provided by the Analog Kid. With this piece of absolute brilliance, Rush are saying, look, if we wanted to, we could do another Moving Pictures. But we've done that, and we want to move on. The Analog Kid is Moving Pictures. And it's a little treat for us all, stating, look, there we are, you can have that, but we want to move on. The track is a very up-tempo rocker with a slow atmospheric chorus, extremely catchy guitar riff, and a fine solo from Alex. Indeed, when I saw them at Birmingham NEC on their Signals tour, this was a song I was particularly looking forward to hear. And Alex broke a string on his solo and I was shattered, and I had to wait a long time before I saw them play it live again. Lyrically, it has clear connections with Subdivisions. Here we found that young man from the suburbs daydreaming in the long grass, drawn like a moth to the bright lights of the city. A decision has been made. Thirst for adventure needs quenching. It's not an easy decision. He has strong family ties, with his mother calling, but go he must. The track reflects on mixed feelings, powerful callings, uncertainty, but decisions have been made. Joined up thinking from here for Neil, between the two opening tracks of the CD. Quick tempo track represents the pace that life has moved on. It's a magnificent two opening masterpieces. The third track, and it's quite unusual for Rush, is Chemistry. It's quite unusual for the fact that all three members are credited with the lyrics. Alex and Geddy came up with the idea and concepts, and Neil worked on those ideas and came up with the lyrics. It looks like it's a song of two parts, especially lyrically. First part is about transmitted emotions between two individuals, the means by which they are received and transmitted. There seems to be a reference to how important these are. This chemistry indeed is discussed to some extent in the next track, The Weapon, and the consequences, particularly the consequences of them breaking down. The second set of lyrics relates to the same process between members of a close-knit group regarding their ability to make music. Music of the song was born out of sound checks, recordings made by engineer John Erickson. Alex and Geddy listened to the tapes and crafted this song from them. It resolves around the keyboard frame with guitar riff interludes. Decent bass line, well played, but definitely up to the standard of the previous two tracks. Always been one for me I can take or leave, even after this close inspection. For me, I really lifted its profile. Let's move on to something more interesting. Track 4 is Digital Man. Now, I tend to agree with a lot of other considered opinion that Chemistry basically is an interlude from the theme that has developed on Subdivisions and the Analog Kid. In other words, Digital Man is a grown-up analog kid. Digital Man is living in the fast lane of life. He lives in a world of fast-speed information, fast-paced communication and transfer of data. and is doing his utmost to keep up with its pace before he physically and mentally burns out. He loves to spend the night in Zion, a safe homeland for wandering people in a break from reality, but instead has to endure the normality of Babylon, his own exile, from his dreams and emotions and ambitions. His only salvation to Avalon, where he might recover his senses from the constant onslaught of change. He has a plan, however. The only fate he can see is his own fate in the back of a black sedan, a fate that awaits us all. Musically, the track is an explosion of different styles and tempos, extremely well played. According to Neil, the band ended up with a disparate stylistic influences, ska, synth pop and hard rock, combined and blended into a force field, and this is expertly performed by all three musicians. According to Geddy, everybody was reaching for a new direction. We wanted to treat our music in a different way. And for mine, it rings that bell. I saw them play it live at Glasgow NEC, and it was a triumph. A musical configuration only Rush could conjure up. I love the piece. Track number 5 is The Weapon. If the Analog Kid is a foot in the past for Rush, The Weapon, part 2 of the Triangle of Fear, is definitely an insight into the future of Rush music, particularly in the 1980s. Rumbling keyboards dominate with a basic melody line. Besides his solo, Alex plays a supplementary role. However, there is a prominent bass line and some very creative percussion. There's a long instrumental piece midsection with Alex's guitar dissolved into the mix of electronic production. Musically, it's a very unusual piece for Rush. However, it's well held together by a particularly impressive verse and chorus from Geddy. It always amazes me how much depth of thought Neil can get via a limited amount of lyrics. Here he reflects on how some people's lives are run by fear. Not ambition, love, money, or the pursuit of happiness. They have a very conservative outlook, investing in a safety net to ensure against the negative rather than seeking the positive. He extends his argument to focus on the way the establishment, i.e. religion, government and certain institutions, process fear as a means to exert some form of control, with a notion that instead of something good will happen, something bad will. And some people make life decisions on this basis, thus fear is used as a weapon against you. This whole triangle of fear concept is something I'll come back to later. It's the fountainhead of a lot of Neil's thinking, and I like to discuss all three parts of this in conjunction with each other. Anyhow, for the moment, The Weapon is a musical experiment, which I think stands Rush in good stead, because later in the 80s they achieve what I think they achieve with some of the music, what they're actually looking for with The Weapon. Anyhow, let's move on. Track 5. That was track 5. Moving on to track 6. See if we'll get this light a bit better. Track 6, originally known as Project 3 minutes 57 seconds, because the band had that much time to fill on the record. Nonetheless, what a cracking little piece of music it turns out to be, New World Man. It's directed, of course, towards the North American people, taking their place as a leading world democracy and influencing a lot of the planet. The lyrics have their warning signs here: clearing up the systems, i.e. focusing on the environment. Too much military and political power needs its self-control. America is a young society compared with the old world of Europe, but its men have already bared arms, losing its share of young men at home and in the European and Pacific theatres. He explains it also stands as the bridge between the old and the third world. It's a positive lyric from Neil because I think he's confident with its democratic structures it can do the right thing. These rebels and these runners from the old world have come to the new to make a positive contribution to the planet's well-being. Musically, it's a nice little gradual pace joint to reflect the soft touch needed from the new world. Perfect single material, all the cliché of Rush's music, definitive verse and chorus, a time change, outstanding bass line, virtuoso percussion, all highlighted at their correct time. Alex is very influenced here by the white reggae music with his Fender Telecaster. The track in such a short time space manages to build into a glorious finish. Peerless from Rush, perfect single with a profound message, all wrote and recorded in a single day. How can you beat that? Track 7 is a track called Losing It. The song itself was inspired by the film Turning Point starring Shirley MacLaine, a tale about two ballet dancers, one who has retired and the other who has her best days behind her. It also mentions Ernest Hemingway as a white-beard writer who shot himself with his favourite shotgun rather than face his mental issues. The lyrics pose a question whether it was worse to lose something great or whether it was worse never to have known it. Of course, on a more individual note, as we get older, everybody is faced with the same dilemma, witnessing their own powers and strengths fade with age. But for Neil, these great artistic talents fading are a loss to us all. Musically, it's a very, very different masterpiece from the band, from what we're normally used to by Rush. It's for me a slow burner of the album, one that still moves me now nearly 40 years after its release. It's harmonic keyboard intro before Alex takes up the rhythm. Masterly crafted melody and verse from Geddy. Flourishes of violin from Ben Mink, enhancing the heartfelt lyrical content before his Barbara O'Reilly inspired climatic solo at the end. It's a staggering, moving and personally inspired piece. It's also a track that actually got me reading a lot of Ernest Hemingway's entire back catalogue. It's a masterpiece, a piece of imperfection. I'll go into Ernest Hemingway a bit later. The last track on the album, track 8, is Countdown. And the track is basically a vivid description of the real events during the launch of the space shuttle Columbia from Cape Canaveral in April 1982. This launch was witnessed by the group from the VIP enclosure Red Sector A. That rings a bell, doesn't it? For a band fascinated with technology, it must have been an awe-inspiring event, one which led to the recording of this piece, which indeed itself had quite a few problems before the band was happy with it. I must say it's a very dramatic piece with its sound effects of helicopters and the voiceover from NASA expert Jerry Griffin. It also has some of Geddy's most ambitious keyboard work and some nice touches from Alex recreating the tense atmosphere of the occasion. One can feel an air of trepidation in the soundtrack, with Geddy's mini morgue at the end of the piece being his artistic impression of the shuttle in free flight. Quite a learning piece for Rush, a first musical documentary, which stands as a great tribute to Commander John Young, and pilot Robert Crippen. In conclusion, The album was another massive commercial success for the band, selling over 1 million copies in the US alone. However, it did have a mixed critical reception. Some praising the band for not making another Moving Pictures, others criticising the greater emphasis on keyboard rather than the guitar. Indeed, some also gave credit in the way the band incorporated keyboard synthesizers into hard rock. Suffice to say, opinion was divided. However, it still generated an extensive tour of the USA, Canada and Europe, including in September 1983 a 5-night performance at Radio City Music Hall, New York, with special guests Marillion. I'd love to have seen them, my two favourite bands. For me, Signals is an insight into where the band's music was heading in the 1980s. It's a stepping stone. I, like everybody else at the time, wanted another Moving Pictures. However, without Signals, other masterpieces would not have followed. The thing about Signals is that at the time, there is only what one can describe as 2 typical Rush tracks on the album, Analog Kid and Chemistry. The other 6 efforts are not what one could describe as typical Rush. Individually, they're all brilliant, strong tracks. However, collectively, at the time, and I'm emphasising at the time, the album strays away from what a fan of the time would have considered mainstream Rush. And for me, that was its downfall at the time. However, that was then, not now. 40 years later, considered opinion is totally different, and the album is held, and rightly so, in very high regard, with hindsight and looking back, and that's how it should be. Star of the album. Well, Alex hasn't really found a home yet on this. He does in later works, but not on this album. Neil's lyrics are as good as ever, and his percussion, his playing is absolutely brilliant. But I'll name Geddy as the star here, because as I've said before, he does great work fitting Neil's words and lyrics into great form. Plus, he's also the driving force musically on Signals, with a greater emphasis on the keyboards. Lyric of the album: sadder still to watch it die than never to have known it. For you, the blind who once could see, the bell tolls for thee. And that's a lament for us all, especially when in later life, that's a lament for us all. Presentation. It's a use concept again by photographer Deborah Samuel. Dog sniffing on a fire hydrant shot on a piece of astroturf. Iconic, brilliant. And the back is a plan of a suburban subdivision with a fictional school named after Canadian baseball player Warren Cromartie. Love it. Iconic Rush. There's no little known facts, but what I would like to place some emphasis on is Ernest Hemingway. The track Losing It inspired me to read a lot of Hemingway's books, and these, Winner Takes Nothing, To Have and To Have Not, Islands of the Stream, are all classics, great examples of Hemingway's work. But I do recommend The Old Man and the Sea, To Whom the Bell Tolls, and particularly Farewell to Arms. If you're into reading and you like literature, I recommend it. Everything there is what Neil's read, and that particular track inspired me to read them all, and they're great books. Right, that'll do me for now. Move on to the next one. I've been playing it already. I won't tell you which. Anyhow, life's getting back to normal. As I've said, I've had my second jab Been to the pub a few times with my mates. I was actually watching a live rugby league match last Saturday, and that's enjoyed that. So I'll see you again. Look after yourself. Stay safe. Done well again. 25-minute review. So look out for the next one. If you've got any comment, I mean, I don't do this for comments and all that shit, but if you've got any comments or out to say, I'd like to hear. If you don't, if you've got criticism of what I'm doing, get it down. But anyway, I've enjoyed doing it, and I've really enjoyed doing it, and it's really given me, even though I've been a massive Rush fan for 40 years, studying him to this extent and burying my head in him for a month really gives me a great insight into Neil's work in the band. And basically, for the past months, I haven't listened to nothing but Rush, even though I like some other music. But anyhow, I'll see you later. Thanks. Stay safe.